For the first time in more than 50 years, humans are preparing to leave Earth orbit and travel back to the Moon. In early 2026, NASA's Artemis 2 mission will send 4 astronauts farther from Earth than any human has gone since the Apollo era. This won't be a landing, not yet, but it will be the first crewed mission of the Artemis program and a critical test flight for everything that comes next. This mission is about proving that NASA is ready to send humans back to the Moon, and eventually onward to Mars. Today, I'm going to break down Artemis 2 in 3 parts: the spacecraft, the mission, and the crew, so let's get into it. Before we talk about where Artemis 2 is going, we need to talk about how it's getting there. The rocket launching Artemis 2 is called the Space Launch System, or SLS, the most powerful rocket ever built for human spaceflight. If it looks a little familiar, that's because its design borrows heavily from the Space Shuttle era. On either side of the rocket are 2 massive solid rocket boosters, and between them is a giant orange core stage filled with super-cold liquid hydrogen and oxygen. And for Artemis 2 specifically, those boosters have a unique visual detail. Each one is painted with a massive, America 250 inches logo, celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States in 2026. It's a fitting tribute. This rocket was built by engineers from all 50 states, representing decades of experience and collaboration. Above the core stage is the Interim Cryogenic Propulsion Stage, or ICPS. This stage provides the final push that sends the spacecraft out of Earth orbit and toward the Moon. And sitting on top of everything is the real star of the mission, Orion. Orion is NASA's deep space crew vehicle, and it's made up of several key sections. At the bottom is the European Service Module, or ESM, built by the European Space Agency. This module provides power, propulsion, oxygen, water, and temperature control. Basically, it's how Orion survives and moves through deep space. Above that is the crew module, often just called the capsule. This is where the astronauts live, work, eat, sleep, exercise, and spend the entire mission. For Artemis 2, the crew has named their capsule Integrity. And when the mission is over, this capsule is the only part of the spacecraft that will return to Earth. At the very top is the Launch Abort System, or LAS. Hopefully it's never needed, but if something goes wrong during launch, this tower can pull the capsule away from the rocket in milliseconds, saving the crew's lives. Artemis 2 is a test flight, but that doesn't make it simple. Artemis 1 launched back in 2022 and successfully tested the SLS and Orion, but it was uncrewed. Artemis 2 is the first time humans will ride this system. That changes everything. With astronauts on board, NASA can now test the systems that only humans can evaluate: communications, radiation protection, navigation, docking procedures, life support, eating, sleeping, exercising, and even using the bathroom in deep space. Inside Orion, the astronauts will gather for meals, rehydrate food, and test water systems. They'll sleep in microgravity and use a compact exercise device that works kind of like a rowing machine, allowing them to do squats, deadlifts, curls, and cardio to protect their muscles and bones. All the human stuff that couldn't be tested before. Artemis 2 will launch from Kennedy Space Center's Launch Pad 39B, the same pad that sent Apollo astronauts to the Moon and launched dozens of space shuttle missions. The first launch window opens on February 5, 2026. When the countdown hits 0, SLS will lift off with more power than any human-rated rocket in history. About 2 minutes into flight, the solid rocket boosters will separate. At around 8 minutes, the core stage shuts down and falls away. Then the ICPS ignites, pushing Orion into a high, elliptical Earth orbit. At its farthest point, Orion will be 46,000 miles from Earth, farther than any crewed spacecraft has gone since Apollo. During this first day, Orion will separate from the ICPS and perform critical docking practice maneuvers. In future missions, Orion will need to dock with the Lunar Gateway and human landing systems. NASA needs to know: does the autopilot behave correctly? Do the thrusters fire as expected? This is especially important after recent spacecraft testing issues. NASA is being extremely cautious. Once Orion swings back toward Earth, it performs a trans-lunar injection burn, sending the crew toward the Moon on what's called a free return trajectory. This means that even if Orion's engine failed, the gravity of the Moon and Earth would naturally bring the spacecraft home, the same type of trajectory that saved Apollo 13. The trip to the Moon takes about 4 days. During that time, the crew will practice emergency procedures, including responses to solar radiation events. Orion includes a radiation shelter, and Artemis 2 will be the first real test of how effective it is with humans on board. Artemis 2 is not a landing mission. Instead, it's a lunar flyby, similar to Apollo 8, the famous Christmas mission of 1968. The spacecraft will travel about 230,000 miles from Earth, passing behind the Moon, the far side, which we never see from Earth. At closest approach, the astronauts will be about 4,600 miles above the lunar surface, getting breathtaking views that only a handful of humans in history have ever seen. After the flyby, Orion begins its journey home. 4 days later, the capsule separates from the service module, re-enters Earth's atmosphere, and splashes down in the Pacific Ocean, where the U.S. Navy will recover the crew. Total mission duration: about 10 days. Now let's talk about the people riding this mission. Artemis 2 has 4 astronauts, and every single one of them is extraordinary. Reed Wiseman, Commander, a Navy test pilot, engineer, and veteran astronaut, Wiseman has spent 167 days in space and will command Artemis 2. Victor Glover, pilot, a test pilot, engineer, and former combat aviator, Glover has flown 40 aircraft and served as a legislative fellow in the U.S. Senate. Christina Koch, mission specialist, an electrical engineer and record holder for the longest single spaceflight by a woman, nearly 1 full year aboard the ISS. Jeremy Hansen, mission specialist, a Canadian astronaut, military pilot, physicist, and this will be his first spaceflight. Imagine your first trip to space being a mission around the Moon. So when is Artemis 2 happening? The first launch window opens February 5, 2026, and yes, there may be delays. Artemis 1 took multiple attempts, and with humans on board, NASA will be extremely cautious. But when Artemis 2 finally lifts off, it will mark humanity's return to lunar space, a critical step toward moon landings, and the beginning of a new era of deep space exploration. If you're as excited for Artemis 2 as I am, make sure to like and subscribe, and check out my other Artemis videos right here. We're going back to the Moon, and this time, we're staying. Rocket full Moon.